afternoon, everyone. I'd like to begin by thanking you all for showing both commitment and passion regarding this issue by attending today. My name is Jo, and I'm delighted to chair this event alongside my fellow youth steering members, Nana and Scarlett. As a youth member, we are always concerned about the long-term impacts of global events on education and, more importantly, student well-being. Unfortunately, as we are all too aware, the cost of living crisis has had a devastating impact on families in Britain. We feel that students are in a vulnerable position, specifically in the aftermath of June 2022 exams. Therefore, today we will see a range of speakers from delivery organisations and students. This includes representatives from the Fair Education Alliance members, MeeToo, Magic Breakfast, Bite Back, and the National Children's Bureau. Not only do we aim to shed light on the intersections of exam stress and cost of living, we hope to promote a proactive outlook on aiding young people going forward. So, without further ado, we'd like to open the session by asking you all to answer this poll. Allow me to hand over to Nana, who will elaborate on this exercise.
Thank you, Jo. Hi, everyone. My name's Nana, and I'm a youth intern at the FEA. I'm also a member of the Youth Steering Group. So as Jo has touched on, pupil wellbeing is something that most people are curious about, whether on an academic level or, we have people trying to mitigate its effects on pupils. In this event, we'd like to flesh out how current affairs may impact the wellbeing of pupils, and within the context of the cost of living crisis. So this icebreaker is intended to get us thinking about how we believe these different elements intersect. So please continue to have a think of the icebreaker questions during the keynotes and feel free to ask them during the panel. So I'm just going to launch the polls, and you should be able to see them. So the first question is, have you thought about the intersection between exam stress, the cost of living crisis, and mental health? And the second question is, have you or someone you know been impacted by exam stress?
Nana, I think you need to press launch on the poll. It's not come up.
I can see the results.
Oh, fab.
Okay. Let's give it a minute. Okay, great to know it's launched. Thank you, Johnny. So far, about 79% of you have said that you've thought about the intersection between exam stress and the cost of living crisis and mental health. 21% of you answered no. And in terms of you knowing someone who's been impacted by exam stress or being impacted yourself, about 87% of you have answered yes, and 13% of you have answered no. So from this, I'd also like to input a link to a Menti to answer the following question. Just going to pop the link in. And yeah, I've just popped in the link in the chat, and this is to answer the question, how do you think the intersection between the cost of living crisis, exam stress, and mental health affect pupils? And remember, you can also think about this question as our panelists and keynote speakers speak, but I am just generally interested in what you all think. And please let me know if the link isn't working. So far, can you all see the different answers?
Not if you're writing. If you're writing, then you can't see it, but once you've written one, it pops up.
Okay, great. So we have risk factors for well-being and mental health issues. Children and young people need to be proactively supported with these issues. Someone also said that the crisis affects every aspect of a young person's life, especially if they have financial stress at home. Perhaps young people need to take on a job and can't study as much. And someone else has also said increased stress perhaps worsen any other existing mental health difficulties, impact on entire support network of a young person. So from some of your answers, I can really tell that this question has different aspects to it. So some of you are mentioning how pupils might have to take on a different job in order to mitigate the impact of the cost of living crisis and how this in turn can affect their mental health. So thank you all for that. And I'd like to hand over to Scarlett to introduce our keynote.
Hi everyone, I'm Scarlett. I'm another member of the FEA's Youth Steering Group, and I hope that both those activities introduce the key themes to you all well. To expand on these ideas, I would like to invite Juliet Sharkey from MeeToo to put the spotlight on mental health.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully I had to shut a lot of tabs, so hopefully it won't have any delays. Can you all see that? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
So my name is Juliet Sharkey, and I am the Youth Marketing and Engagement Coordinator at MeeToo. I'm here to briefly talk to you about MeeToo, what we do, why we exist, and what is happening with youths and their mental well-being during exams, pre and post-pandemic. Please be aware that the quotes of users mentioned are all genuine, but we have modified them a little bit to make sure that the users remain anonymous. MeeToo is a multi-award winning, fully moderated, anonymous mental health app for young people aged 11 plus, with over 65,000 registered users. Because the app is fully moderated, every post and reply is tagged and risk assessed by a human before publication. This makes the app very safe, but it also means that our data is uniquely accessible and informative. When the government announced that schools were being locked down in response to the COVID crisis back in March 2020, access to mental health services were cut. As a digital service with moderators who work remotely, MeeToo was one of the very few providers that were unaffected by the crisis. Between 8:30 and 8:30 a.m. and 8 p.m. on March 20th, 2020, the day lockdown was announced, MeeToo received 27 suicidal posts. Fortunately, the escalation in suicidal ideation did not last, and the months passed. As the months passed, we noticed that contrary to expectations, some things seemed to get better, not worse. MeeToo users who had social anxiety absolutely loved lockdown, and they actually struggled to come to terms with going back to school. The incidence of anxiety, depression, and self-harm actually reduced between March and May. And in August, anxiety about going back to school increased, showing this is when the mental health crisis was to commence. One user said, "I'm so scared about going back to school. I have social anxiety and lockdown was such a relief for me, but now I have to go back to shaking and sweating in a classroom where I can't open my mouth to speak." Through lockdown, posts from MeeToo, users constantly refer to how difficult it has been to keep up with schoolwork. Some young people were working in shared bedrooms and had no access to laptops, but they were the exceptions. For most, the issue was not a lack of technology, but a lack of motivation. Most young people described how difficult it was to concentrate, and there was a universal struggle to remain motivated. These challenges were similar whether a student was in secondary school or university. Another user said, "I'm not motivated at all. It's hard to revise when you're so worried. I study in my room, but it's much more distracting than working at uni where you can easily go to a library for quiet space." This year's exam season left students with high levels of anxiety among pupils in the run-up to GCSEs and A-levels. There were reports of panic attacks, angry outbursts, self-harm, and disengagement among students. After GCSEs and A-levels were cancelled for 2 years because of COVID, this year's cohort of A-level students had not yet experienced public exams. Because A-level students haven't completed their GCSEs, they have never dealt with the pressure of exam stress. They don't have exam experience, so exam stress was really a fresh feeling for them. This heightens the symptoms of anxiety and the fear of failure. One user said, "I have my first 2 A-level exams tomorrow, which makes me physically sick. I'm biting my nails and picking my hair out. Exams are all my friends and family talk about, and I can't think about anything else. I can't remember the last time I didn't cry to sleep." Another said, "I'm going to fail my exams. They are so stressful, I can't cope." Currently, students are waiting for their exam results and anxieties haven't eased. "I feel like I've not done well in my exams. All my friends are expecting at least A's and I don't think I've got that. I hate myself so much. I should have done more and I can't stop thinking about it." It's really important for students or any young person to talk about these fears and pressures. We have been reviewed by the Anna Freud Center from UCL and found to improve well-being across the board. MeeToo has an extensive directory of resources which provide everything from crisis and specialist support through to rated apps, TED Talks, podcasts, videos, educational resources, activities, and products. The directory and the feed can be filtered by topic. So for example, a young person who is sitting exams can click on the exams tab, which switches both their feed and their directory so that all the resources they see offer support relating to exams. Young people's personal stories are also published in the directory, and these can be filtered by topic too. As an early intervention service, we have high efforts into creating engagement activities with our partner schools for staff to better support their students. In April, MeeToo shared a presentation to help reduce students' stress as they prepare for their exams, which was shared with our schools to use during tutor time or as part of an assembly. If you're a young person listening today, consider downloading the app. You can scan the QR code on the screen. You may not need it now, but it is always there to support you. And if you need a pick-me-up, you can go in and reply to someone. One message to a stranger can make a lifetime of difference to them. Thank you. And I think I'm passing it back to Nana, if that's correct.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
Scarlett, you can pick up from there.
Thank you very much for those interesting words, Julia, and insight into student mental health. I would now like to pass the mic to our next keynote speaker. After discussing the dire state of young people's mental health as it is important to frame it in the context of current events. So I would like to invite Rebecca Thinesh from Magic Breakfast to begin their presentation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Timish, and I'm the campaigns officer here at Magic Breakfast, and I will be giving just a little bit of context about the cost of living crisis and its impact on schools, families, and children and young people themselves before we hand it over to our amazing youth panel. So as you all likely know, we are experiencing a period of high inflation, which has meant that food, fuel, and other costs are far more expensive relative to people's wages and other income. And it can be really easy to forget that schools are subject to economic distress. But what we've seen is that schools were already feeling pressure to be able to provide services such as breakfast clubs for their most disadvantaged students, and are now worrying that the crisis will mean that both more students are acutely in need and schools will have less resources to be able to provide those services. So in April, we released a report called Hidden Hunger, the State of UK Breakfast Provision in 2022, which we can post a link to in the chat, which is sort of the first effort to map what breakfast provision looks like across the country. And this report shows that the current model of breakfast provision is only reaching 1 in 4 of the most disadvantaged children and young people in UK schools, but that schools are still one of the largest places where young people are currently accessing breakfast. So, but the majority of schools are not able to provide that without significant barriers. And so This data was collected before some of the fuel hikes and shows that schools were already struggling. And what we're hearing from schools since is that increased fuel costs, increased staffing costs, and other economic pressures are going to put immense pressure on school meals writ large. And we have heard that schools and school caterers are considering cuts to portion sizes and changes to the food offered, which we feel will have disparate impacts on the most marginalized children and young people. We've also just released a policy brief in collaboration with our partners at the Child Poverty Action Group, which demonstrates the importance of fully funded before and after school breakfast and activity clubs, which we sometimes refer to as wraparound childcare. So we found that access to these programs has numerous social benefits for children and young people. So being able to take time out of their day, decompress, socialize, make friends, and pursue their passions and interests outside of the classroom, which is so important for young people's mental health. But they also have numerous economic benefits to whole families. So we found that single low-income parents stand to gain an additional 1,200 pounds a year when their children have access to wraparound school breakfast and activity clubs. But what's crucial, and one of the reasons that we're on this call today, is that a lot of the framing of the cost of living crisis does not center the voices and experiences of children and young people directly, but we know that being young doesn't insulate someone from the impacts of the current cost of living crisis. Young people understand and feel the pressures of the world around them, whether that is because of the effects it has on the services that they receive, the pressures that it puts on the families, or the way that it shapes their own view of their futures and sort of their possibilities and what routes are open to them. So my role here at Magic Breakfast is to support our youth campaigners, all of whom have just sat through an exam season, many of whom are sitting exams for the first time due to COVID. But it's not just teens and sort of older young people who feel these pressures so deeply. And I wanted to share a quote that we heard from, oh, sorry, I'm getting a chat that my audio is a little low. Are folks able to hear me? Maybe just put in the chat. I'll just take a brief moment to hear if I can. Okay, so it might just be one person's audio. Just wanted to make sure that there's a bit of background noise. Sorry about that. I'll just go ahead and enunciate a little clearer, but I wanted to share a quote that we heard from a year 4 student as part of our interview process for our policy brief that we released with the Child Poverty Action Group. This is a year 4 student who, when asked about before and after school clubs, put it very succinctly. She said, if you don't have enough money, then you can't join anything because you need money. And, you know, if that doesn't sum up the extent to which all children and young people understand the role that money and finances play in their sort of access to services and their chances in life, then I don't know what does. So Magic Breakfast and sort of across the coalition of organizations working to support children and young people, we understand how crucial the onus is on us to heed the words and the leadership of young people and to support them in making sure that that voice is heard. So I'm really thrilled to be sort of providing a little bit of context leading up to this really necessary youth panel today. And I hope that all of the adult allies present on this call can take dutiful notes and really pick up the charge that our young people are presenting. So thank you so much. I'm happy to put any additional links in the chat, and I will just go ahead and pass it back so that we can get onto the panel discussion.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was really insightful, making the links between how the cost of living crisis has actually exacerbated how people from low-income backgrounds can access before and after school clubs. So moving on from that, I'd actually like to further frame the topic at hand today. So the link between mental health and exams is something that is discussed at all levels and experienced by pupils. The effects of it are real. So whilst the discourse on it can be quite academic, we must remember how it impacts people. So considering the recent cost of living crisis, pupils from lower socioeconomic backgrounds may have exacerbated concerns, which can also impact their mental health. So having framed that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. So we have Rose and Mahalia from the National Children's Bureau Youth Board, Destiny from Bite Back 2030's Youth Board, and Haida, who is a youth campaigner from Magic Breakfast. So you guys can take a couple of minutes to introduce yourselves.
Shall I go first? Hi, my name is Mahalia. I'm a member of National Children's Bureau. I'm 18 years old and I recently sat my A-levels and I'm anxiously awaiting the results.
Thank you, Mahalia. We can have Rose now.
Rose hasn't been able to join us, I'm afraid. So if we maybe pass on to one of the others.
Okay, yeah, sure. Destiny from Bite Back 2030, you can introduce us.
Hi everyone, I'm Destiny and I'm 18 years old, and similar to Mahalia, I've also just finished my A-level exams, and it makes sense to you as well. I understand how it can really affect students' mental health. But I work with Bite Back and we're about protecting child health and ensuring that young people have access to healthy and nutritious food. And we led many campaigns, including extending free school meals. And I'll talk a bit about that later on.
Thank you for that. And Haydar?
I'm Haydar Nasser. I'm from Magic Breakfast. I'm 16 years old. I also just started my GCSE. Prior to that, I was in a pandemic recovery summit with Citizens UK, who I will be working with in September also for a year-long program post-pandemic. Magic Breakfast is a surreal and an amazing thing as it brings people together. It's an opportunity where staff and students come in the morning to be united under one thing, which is breakfast. We are looking to expand our breakfast provisions to be across the UK, and we wrote a letter as youth campaigners to Boris Johnson asking for more breakfast provisions, and hopefully he listens to us, or someone does, because it's urgently needed to support the cost of living. Also, we see that Magic Breakfast is an amazing thing in my community, as it brought many people together within my school and our local community, and it takes off the weight of the parents in the morning, which is just phenomenal. And I'm thankful to be a youth campaigner at Magic Breakfast.
Thanks for that, Haydar. So the questions I would like to pose to our panelists, and I also want our wider audience to think about, what do you see as a link between the cost of living crisis, exam stress, and mental health? And the second question is there anything you've seen work well in your school or wider community to help young people overcome these challenges? And or do you have any ideas? So I'd like the wider audience to put your questions in the chat, and we'll come to them after our panelists discuss these questions. So I can go back to Mahalia if you'd like to start, and then we can move on from there.
I can't remember what you said the first question was.
Oh yeah, I
Sorry.
I can repeat them if you like. So the first question is, what do you see as a link between the cost of living crisis, exam stress, and mental health? And the second bit is there anything you've seen work well in your school or wider community to help young people overcome these challenges, and or do you have any ideas?
I think it is quite clear there is a link between exam stress and the cost of living crisis and people's mental health. I feel like this year has been quite traumatic for a lot of people, a lot of children especially. Because of COVID, we were already kind of disadvantaged, and we didn't have the same experiences or the same mindset that we would have had it not happened. And then the cost of living crisis made this even worse. And children have been put in a situation which they shouldn't really be in. I know a lot of my friends have recently finished their exams, both GCSEs and A-levels, and they've had to balance studying and jobs because they couldn't afford like basic food or heating. It's been a real struggle for a lot of people, and it's taken a toll on their mental health. For the second part of what I've seen that could be beneficial, our schools haven't really done much, or at least my school hasn't, but they did send us a link to a walk-in wellness like clinic that it was every Wednesday, and they would pop in and say, if you need to like if you need to talk about anything, then feel free. And that was like the only thing, I guess, that was available.
Thanks for your insight, Mahalia. We will definitely come back to your insights and your ideas, but for now we'll move on to Destiny.
Yeah, so for the first question, as an A-level student, I can definitely see the link between the cost of living crisis and exam stress and mental health. And I think at some level, they're all quite overlooked by people higher up in officials. Like, for example, with the cost of living crisis, a lot of families have been pushed into poverty. Nearly like 800,000 children have been pushed into poverty, but there's been no adjustment to free school meal provisions, and that's something that Bite Back have been working towards. And then with exam stress, especially with people that are doing their A-levels and GCSEs, it's such a new type of stress that people wouldn't really recognize the levels of stress in students. And it's really important that we really look at the different types of anxieties and mental health issues that can arise from exam stress in particular. And the rise in mental health amongst young people is something that needs to really be pushed up the agenda as well, because that affects so many other things, and it would really help for young people to have access to people that they can speak to and things like this, and making sure that we eat correctly, and we have access to people that we can talk to, and not just teachers but professionals as well. And with the second question, I think on a organizational level, as Bite Back, me and some of the other youth members of the London board, we've been looking at developing ideas around how we can help people's mental health and also physical health. So we've been looking at the idea of kind of healthy youth pods, where we can have different areas where people can gather around, especially like students and young adults, who like it would have not only like a safe place to relax and de-stress from all the stresses of even just being at home, being at school, all of these things. You can just have a safe place to relax, and then also having a space to have healthy, nutritional food that would not only help you mentally, but also in your education as well, because healthy food is such an important tool for your education as well. So, and even linking to the cost of living crisis as well, so many people have been pushed into poverty and lower incomes, so they can only afford junk food. So I think it's really important that we provide an alternative of healthier, affordable options for younger people.
Thank you, Destiny. And
Haida? I just want to say that it's like a domino effect. So they all link to each other. So if you topple one, the rest of them fall. So if someone has a mental health problem, exam stress, it will tip them off the edge. Then you have more stress at home. So all these factors like build up, and you're like going to explode in a sense. Because imagine there's a balloon and you blow into the balloon constantly, but the pin is near. That's how so many people feel. The cost of living crisis has made people choose between having a house over their head or eating or feeding their children, which is inhumane and unjust. Like, no one should ever have to go through this on a daily basis. And I know people who have. My school has supported me through the end, like gone above and beyond. Like, this is one of the reasons why I became a Magic Breakfast Youth campaigner, because I saw the huge impact. I'm not bigging up Magic Breakfast. I'm just showing like that it's had like a huge impact on my local community, and like I'm like really proud of it, and I want it to be universal because it has brought our school together, and it's actually helped people in a sense. Also, the attainment gap has widened and is going to continue to widen until there is support for students. I think there needs to be more mental health support, a raise in the minimum wage, and more support for people who are financially unstable in my community. Because I live in Bradford district, which is one of the worst hit communities, and the levelling up scheme currently is not doing anyone a favour. It's just putting more barriers in people's way. So I think personally, people need to come together as a community and ask more from people who form policies, and make sure that they stick to the policies, because everyone just say, oh, the support, that we're going to give you support, but what does this support actually look like? And how does it tailor to the communities that is given to, and how can we tailor it to make sure that it fits the communities? That's all.
Very well said. Thank you for your insight. We'd now like to open the floor for questions for our panelists, so please pop them in chat. And yeah, I don't know if Joe, you'd have anything to say, or if not, we can just go for the questions first.
Should we just start directing questions, then we can wrap it up?
Yeah.
So we've got a question from Agale there. I found that the mental health crisis and the cost of living crisis in particular are quite stigmatized in society. Do you have any suggestions on how these topics can be destigmatized in schools, universities, and especially those that are not known for being inclusive, i.e. private school sector, etc.? Is there anyone you want to jump in and answer that?
So on a minimal level, I mean, education is the most important thing. You know, to destigmatize something, I think people need to relearn about the basics of what it is. And I think that we need to establish that anyone can suffer from mental health issues and things like that. And I think at the minimal level, we need to educate people and reteach how they think about certain issues.
That's a really good answer. We've got another question. Are many students 16 to 18 working to supplement their incomes in your experiences? So maybe Malia or Haida can answer that.
I could answer that. Yeah, a lot of people in my constituent do work to support their families, because the minimum wage is not supporting anyone. Like bread, for example, is like expensive. Petrol, I think people are just giving up. So to support their families from falling down, people have to work. They are given no choice. They are left with no choice. And I'm going to work next year to support myself, to make sure that I'm not left to topple on the floor, that I can support myself financially, that I'm not dependable on anyone else, that I can support myself until I can go to university, which then I will have to apply for a loan because everything is so expensive. And then I'll have to pay my loan for the next 50 years.
Does anyone else want to give an answer to that?
I just want to agree. I think I've seen it a lot more after exams, but I saw definitely during exams as well. There was a lot of people who had jobs and were working just to make sure that they have some money, like to keep for themselves and to help support their families.
Okay, that's really great. So I think you've got time for 2 more questions now. I'm just going to do the ones that are currently in the chat, and anyone can answer those. More people can answer those. So from Sally from Place to Be, my question is, are the young campaigners going to try and reach out to whoever the new PM is, and how do we think we can get the attention of that person? So campaigning mechanisms.
Could I answer that, because I'm very political?
Yeah.
I think personally, no one will. Maybe some people might reach out, because the two contenders at the moment are people who are in our current cabinet, which had no effect. Like our former chancellor is running for prime minister. A person who controls our money and could help support our community is becoming prime minister, and he says he's going to do this. He's going to create policies to help us. But where were these policies for the past 2.5 years? They were non-existent. It's just a bunch of lies. I think people are falling out of place with the people in power because they don't trust them anymore, and we need to rebuild the trust as young people and tell them that it is not. We need a general election, I think personally, and get the real people in power, which is, I'm not going to say because I don't want to be controversial. I think we just need a general election to sort our burning country, because it is burning to the floor. As a young person, I see our country with not a very good future. So I personally think that the next prime minister needs to be a people's prime minister and not a self-serving prime minister. That's what I have to say.
As I think, unfortunately, definitely the case at the moment. And does anyone else have any solutions or any kind of activism they think they'd like to get involved in for the future?
Yeah, so the work that we do at Bite Back is very, in your face. So we like to do a lot of campaigns and stunts. The other day, we went to 10 Downing Street. Well, it wasn't the other day, but a couple of months ago, we went to 10 Downing Street and spoke to, some advisors there as well. And then we do more stunts, which is more for big corporations like Kellogg's to tackle the way that they advertise certain products. And I think in terms of, getting the attention of the new prime minister and, when they reshuffle the cabinet and all of those stuff, I think just going at all different angles. So we've got different petitions. So going through the political route where you can sign petitions to get them debated in the Houses of Parliament. You've got just emailing your local MPs, and then you've got talking to, your local councillors and all of those different political routes. And then you've got social media. You can use your own voice to express how you feel. And even if it doesn't pick up or it's only your friends that see it, at least you're voicing your important opinion. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Destiny. And another question here, asking about what kind of policy changes we'd like to see. So from your own personal perspective on education, what do you think that you and other young people want to see in the future of education?
Could I answer that, please?
Of course, yeah.
I would like to say that the policies that are made are actually tailored to the communities that face these problems. And the policies, before they actually made policies, that we see them, because I know that was one of our policies at the Pandemic Recovery Summit, the people in power, that before the policy is actually made a policy, we see what the policy is. So we see how it affects us, the aftermath, the post, and how can we adapt it to make sure that it is tailored to the communities that face these problems. And I think that is a really big thing. And also trust. Trust is a really big thing in community. And I think we need to rebuild trust with people of power.
Can I add something as well?
Of course, yeah.
I would like to see more involvement with young people, because it's not the same if it's just coming from like a middle-aged rich politician. You have to understand the young person's perspective and what they need and what they want, and it's not going to be useful, or it's not going to benefit anyone if they don't listen to other young people's opinions and thoughts.
Yeah, brilliant. There's this question I got on a message from Claire Addy asking, do you think that having any access to great advice about your future opportunities and the support to access these opportunities is linked to the lessened stress? So do you become more optimistic when you have links and support about your future and advice and information? Does anyone want to answer that?
I don't mind.
Of course.
I think this is definitely a good thing, but it's not like readily available. I know at my school there's one like careers advisor who you can like talk to about your future, but you have to book an appointment with them like at least a month before, and you have to go through your form tutors, and they have to go through the head of years, and they have to go to the head teachers, and it's like a long hassle, and it's not like easily accessible. But I feel like it's really, really, really important to have someone who you can talk to about like any concerns or any future worries. Without that person, or without that like that group of people, you're kind of isolated.
Do you feel that needs to be someone that is in school, someone that has a rapport with the students, or would it be better to come from an external person who has access to internships and stuff like that?
I feel like any would be good at this point, because if anything is better than nothing. And I've seen both, I think, at my school, because I mentioned earlier we had like a wellness clinic that would come in every Wednesday, and they were like completely random people who we'd never seen before, and more people went to go talk to them than would like make an appointment with the careers advisor. So I feel like either is good, but both would be better.
Could I add something to that?
Of course, jump in there.
My school, fortunately, has allocated funds and supported us to the end, really. But now I feel I've left school, like the community needs to do something. And it's very unfortunate for them students whose school hasn't supported them. My school has, like, when there's leftover bagels or beans, like my school, they go out and give it to the people that are struggling. I know we donated a lot of food to NHS staff, and that we've actually paid people to come in every Wednesday to deliver mental health sessions. And I feel like schools should be more about that. They should be caring about the students' well-being, and in general, they should just be more caring. And I'm lucky that my school actually did that for me. But I feel in the wider community, it's forgotten, and people in power and local leaders don't really care about children, because we're seen as children, and we need to be seen as a voice and the future. Because I know it sounds cliche, but we are the future, and we need to be taken more seriously. I know everyone in here takes us seriously, that's why you're here today, but I just feel like people need to be taken more seriously, like young people.
I think that's a very, very valid point. I just we've got Toby Murray asking for some clarification about whether it's about specific policies or just a fundamental shift in how policymakers think about young people. So, for instance, I would talk about exam stress will probably be solved by completely revamping the exam system. So, is there any policies in specific that you think need to be addressed in the education sector and need to be pushed for?
Could I speak about that?
Of course.
I feel like policy should not be just shaped around the idea like, oh, there's exam stress, you only can have mental health problems around exams. Mental health impacts people all year long, and I feel like before we put money into like anything, education is key. And I've always said it, if you get these problems sorted in school and they're educated in schools, then you will have a lifetime of education, and you can like spread that education. So I feel like before we have so many deep-rooted problems, we need to go to education and educate communities about mental health problems, the cost of living, and how they can make sure that they're adapted to sort themselves out. And then for policies, I feel like policies, you need to tailor it to the community, because it's not one person that's affected, but it might be a whole community. I don't know if I answered the question.
I think you're more saying that it's more about the fundamental shift, so changing the way that we look at stuff, and also focusing on early years so people have access to mental health knowledge and support like from the get-go. Is that right? Yeah, does anyone else want to have anything to say on that before we move on to the next question? Maybe Destiny? Don't want to put you on the spot there, but...
Yeah, no, it's okay, I wouldn't speak. Just from an individual perspective, like for me personally, through the A-level exams, I absolutely hate exams. I don't think it's a good representation of how young people perform, because I've known people to be getting A's throughout their whole educational career, whatever, and all of a sudden, just because of that one set of A-level exams, they're getting C's. And that creates even more mental health issues, because people feel like they're not enough and they validate themselves through academic terms. So I feel like through specific policies, such as, different routes other than just exams at the end of the 2 years for A-levels, for example, I think that other ways, such as coursework or just other routes are possible. And then on a different scale with free school meals, especially with the cost of living crisis, I think that the government really needs to extend the provision of that, because a lot of children are in poverty, but they can't have free school meals at the moment. So yeah, I think that's also something that needs to be tackled.
Yeah, I completely agree. And before we move on, I just want to ask if you all have any closing remarks just before we finish the session and before I wrap up and summarize this panel. Is there any last things you guys would like to say? Yeah, Haida, do you want to go first, and maybe we can go around, make sure everyone gets.
I feel to remove any barriers, we just need universal free school meals, to remove the commenting about it that is only for poor people, to end the stigmas. That's the word, stigma. To end the stigmas around it. So I feel like breakfast provision should be stretched universally, and free school meals, because when you go to school, education is the only thing you should be worried about. Nothing should be in your way, no challenge. School is there to support you, and that it should be there to support you, not to put problems for your parents. I know at my school, it costs £15 a week to just eat a meal. £15. Some people couldn't afford that, and that could go towards an energy bill, or it could go towards a rent where people is due is to keep a roof over your head, or towards some food that you need after school. So I feel like we need to raise our voices more about these issues that are affect us all, and I feel like they need to really be shouted at to the people in power, because we've said it, and I've known Buyback have done some campaigning as the Magic Breakfast has, but no one listens. This is why we need to make sure that people in power actually listen to us and keep to their promises.
Destiny?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, the fact that there's so many people here as well, just to raise your voice, raise the problems, and, spread awareness about certain things, especially young people as well. I think in terms of spreading awareness, I think we have so much power in that. But then also adults, with your expertise, experience, knowledge, whatever, you can spread so much awareness to different people, and talk to the officials, and send emails, send all of these things that you can do. Just do it and try to express these different problems that we're seeing with mental health, with free school meals, with the cost of living crisis. All of these things, the politicians, as Ada said, they're not listening. So we need to just spread awareness and raise these problems up and up the government's agenda.
Absolutely. And we're running a bit out of time, but Malia, would you like to quickly add on to that?
I'll just say something really, really quickly. I think if there's anything that involves a young person or concerns a young person in any kind of way, then involve children and young people, because you need to get their thoughts, their opinions, and find the root of the problem before you can start to make any difference or any change. I think I should stop, because I don't know how much time there is.
That was brilliant, thank you. And just quickly closing, I just want to give a special round of applause for everyone, obviously as much as that is possible in Zoom, of course, to our fantastic students who have shown a lot of bravery and a lot of ingenuity by coming up with these ideas and sharing their stories. And as a GCSE student myself, I really resonate with these words, and I hope you'll be able to take away a lot of key information from this. Now on to Scarlett. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thanks, Jo. And thank you so much to our panelists again. We spent a lot of time talking about these issues and sharing our thoughts and ideas. However, the FEA really wants to promote how you can get involved and how we can give you the information for a really successful event. So I'd like to hand over to Bite Back.
Yeah, so hi guys, I'm Destiny, as you know by now, and I'm part of the London Youth Board at Bite Back 2030. And recently we've been working on a petition that is really focused on extending free school meals to all, people, young people in poverty. So if I'm able to share my screen. Oh, I'm not sure I can share my screen. Okay, so we started a petition basically calling on the government to extend the provision of free school meals. And as Bite Back, as I said, we're all centered around the idea that every young person deserves access to healthy and nutritious food. But right now, that's really not the reality. And as young people, we've been working with officials such as councillors and MPs to try and push different agendas up the government's agenda. And we've really been trying to look at free school meals due to the cost of living crisis. And so with this, as we said, it links to students' mental health as well. And just in general, for students, a lot of people may skip meals or even find that their their school meals that are offered maybe for £2.50 are more expensive than, junk food alternatives that are down the street for £1.50, chicken and chips. There's a lot of London kids, can relate to that. And even just from our London Youth Board, one of our youth members said that a lot of his friends skip school dinners because it's too expensive and wait to get chicken and chips from the local shop because it's so much cheaper, which really highlights the idea of how students are essentially being forced into having to buy these junk food alternatives rather than being able to access free school meals simply because they didn't meet one criteria from the free school meals provision. So as Bite Back, we've been trying to find a solution for this. And as I said, we've started a campaign and a petition to extend the eligibility criteria for free school meals, which would ensure that 800,000 children currently living in poverty become eligible. So I'm going to put the link in for the campaign and petition. So it would be really good if you could follow Bite Back on any social media you have, or even subscribe to our emailing list, because then you get like a download of all the things that we're doing, and learn more about why we're doing what we're doing and how you can help.
Thank you so much for that, Destiny. And I just want to wrap up our session today. And I think that was a really inspiring note to end on. And I really think these suggestions have the capacity to change the way that we approach this issue, not just child poverty and hunger, but just generally inequality in education, particularly amongst young children. And if you all have to take away anything from what we've talked about, I hope it will be that despite how many difficulties you and others may face, especially mental health and financial struggles, but also anything else you do in your life, that everyone deserves access to basic provisions, to not give up hope, and we can get there. And there are so many people, as has been shown by our amazing students and amazing campaigners, that want to change things today. And for that reason, as I mentioned, the FEA wants this to be a productive session where we look forward to the future. And therefore, we want to give you guys the opportunity to share any online or in-person resources for anyone that may be struggling with either of these issues, or any petitions like we just had from Destiny that we can all sign together and help be a part of that collective change. And also want to remind you to sign up for our youth bulletin, which has loads of information about current education policies, links and resources. And thank you so much. And I want to hand over to Becca just to give the end of this talk.
Thank you so much there, Joe, and for all of our speakers and hosts that we've had today. It's been a real privilege to work with you over the last couple of weeks to bring together what I think has been a fantastic event. And I really, really take on board what you guys have said, and I've been cheering from my desk here for some of the answers to those questions. So as we wrap up today, there are a couple of things that we would like for you to do. As I mentioned, there's a link going in the chat now to keep up to date with our youth steering group. They write a bulletin every month, and so do sign up to that. And then we have a final poll, and this is the first time we have ever done an event led by our youth steering group. So please do take the time to answer. Oh, Nana, could you launch the polls? Because I think you've got it on yours. Do take the time to answer and let us know how you found the event today. So hopefully a poll will appear on your screen shortly. And then if you can answer those before you leave. But just to finish on a huge thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us today as audience members. I hope you've taken a lot from it, and also to our speakers. So to our chairs, Nana, Scarlett and Joe from our youth steering group. Okay, we can't launch the final poll, in which case not to worry about that one. Our speakers who gave a bit of a framing of the context, Rebecca and Juliet, and then our brilliant student panel that we finished with there with Destiny, Mahalia and Hader. So thank you so much, and I hope everybody has a good afternoon and enjoys the poll is up. There we go, we have it. So if you could just take the time to fill that out before you finish for the day, and then enjoy your summer holidays and the rest of your afternoon. And thank you, everybody. And brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.